I spent $9,000 on flights, dinners, and a hotel block so my family could attend my book launch. No one showed. Instead, my brother posted, "Good luck with your little hobby." My aunt texted, "Let us know when you're published for real." I smiled, and that night, I canceled the rent subsidy I'd been quietly covering for 3 years. The next morning, their landlord called. "Not my lease anymore," I said. A week later, the fallout began. I used to think the family horror stories on Reddit were elaborate fiction, the kind of dramatic nonsense people invented for internet points. Cousins stealing inheritances, mother-in-laws demanding to name babies, siblings committing identity fraud. I'd read these posts and think, nobody actually lives like this. Then it happened to me, and I realized I'd been giving humanity far too much credit. My family could have been the poster children for both our /raised by narcissists and our /petty revenge in a single devastating post. It all started with my book. For most of my adult life, I'd written in complete solitude, nights after work, weekends that weren't really weekends, vacations that were anything but restful. I didn't post about my progress on social media or seek encouragement from anyone. I simply wanted to finish something meaningful, something I could put my name on without shame or qualification. When I finally landed a contract with a small but legitimate publisher and received approval for an actual book launch event, I decided to make it significant. Not flashy or ostentatious, but meaningful, a real celebration of more than a decade of private dedication. I booked a venue in Manhattan, hired a professional photographer, arranged quality catering. The expenses added up quickly, but I reasoned that you only publish your debut novel once. $9,000 later, I'd covered everything. Flights from Ohio for my mother, brother Daniel, and Aunt Linda, plus hotel accommodations and dinner reservations at a restaurant they'd actually remember. I even made personalized name cards for their front row seats, wanting them to feel honored rather than obligated to attend. This was my moment to share something I built entirely through my own effort, and I wanted the people who'd raised me to witness it. The day before the event, I sent confirmation messages to all 3 of them. Radio silence. I assumed their flights had been delayed, or they were too exhausted from travel to respond immediately. The morning of the launch, I woke early and checked my phone with the anxious energy that comes with anticipating something important. Still nothing. Janice, my girlfriend, told me not to spiral into worry. She predicted they'd probably arrive at the last minute and make some dramatic entrance. She was half right. They did make a statement, just not the kind either of us expected. They didn't come. We delayed the start of the event, with me checking the venue entrance obsessively while Janice handled the growing restlessness of actual attendees. I pretended not to notice the 3 empty chairs in the front row, their name cards becoming increasingly conspicuous as the evening progressed. Eventually, I had to accept reality and deliver my prepared remarks to a room that felt incomplete despite being full of supportive friends and genuine readers. Afterward, sitting alone in a back room with a drink I didn't really want, I finally looked at my phone. A message from Daniel had arrived during my speech. "Good luck with your little hobby." An hour later, Linda contributed her own assessment. "Let us know when you get published for real." My mother offered nothing, not before the event, not after, not even an acknowledgement that it had happened. I sat in that room for a long time, processing emotions I didn't have names for. Humiliation was too simple. Disappointment was insufficient. What I felt was a kind of existential stupidity. Because what they didn't know, what I'd never told them, was that for 3 years, I'd been quietly covering 1/3 of their collective rent every month. Not occasionally, not when they asked, but religiously. Month after month, I'd wire money directly to their landlord, Victor, because Daniel couldn't maintain steady employment, Linda faced mounting medical expenses, and my mother claimed she was managing their shared financial situation. No announcements, no requests for gratitude, just silent support that allowed them to maintain their lifestyle without acknowledging where the stability came from. That night, sitting in a 5-star hotel room I'd paid for, staring at untouched gift bags I'd prepared for people who'd chosen not to show up, I opened my laptop and composed an email to Victor. The message was brief and professional. "Starting next month, I will no longer be covering rent payments for the tenants at their address. Please notify them accordingly." Victor called the following morning, wanting confirmation. "This is no longer my responsibility," I told him. That was the end of our business relationship. A week later, they were evicted. No frantic phone calls from them, no apologetic emails, No attempts at explanation. Just complete silence, as if they'd simply vanished from existence. I almost convinced myself that was the conclusion of our relationship. I was wrong. 10 days after the eviction notice was served, I was finally beginning to feel like I could move forward. I'd stopped compulsively checking my phone, stopped rehearsing conversations that would never happen. I'd even started drafting my second novel, reclaiming the mental space that had been consumed by anger and disappointment. Then came the knock. It arrived at 9:30 p.m., too late for deliveries, too deliberate to be casual. Heavy, insistent, designed to announce presence to the entire neighborhood. When I opened the door, I didn't need to guess who I'd find. All three of them stood on my porch, Daniel carrying a duffel bag like a displaced college student, Linda dragging a suitcase with a broken wheel that screeched with every movement, and my mother positioned behind them with her arms crossed, already surveying the interior of my house as if planning her occupancy. Daniel didn't waste time with pleasantries. "We need to stay here. Just for a week. We don't have anywhere else right now. It's temporary." I stared at them, processing not shock but disbelief at their audacity. They'd ignored my book launch, dismissed my achievement as a hobby, then showed up unannounced with luggage, expecting accommodation like this was some kind of casual favor between friends. Janice appeared behind me, having heard the commotion from upstairs. She didn't ask who was at the door, the voices had carried. She pulled me into the hallway and whispered urgently, "Don't make a scene. Just 1 week. We'll establish clear boundaries." Every instinct told me to refuse entry and lock the door. But I nodded agreement, though I still don't fully understand why. Perhaps I needed to see exactly how far they were willing to push before acknowledging any boundaries at all. 1 week, I told them. After that, you're gone. No negotiation. Fair enough, Daniel replied, as if we were executing a standard rental agreement. They walked past me without waiting for a formal invitation. From the first night, the dynamic felt wrong. Daniel asked for the Wi-Fi password before inquiring about sleeping arrangements. Linda immediately claimed the guest room, citing her chronic back problems. Daniel ended up on the living room couch, while my mother commandeered the recliner and made passive-aggressive comments about how I should have arranged proper accommodations if I expected them to rest comfortably. They consumed our food without asking, changed television settings to their preferences, and treated our home like a hotel where they were dissatisfied with the service. Daniel complained that we didn't have premium streaming subscriptions. Linda informed Janice that she'd overcooked dinner on the second night. My mother suggested I move my car so her food delivery driver could access the driveway more easily. Through all of this, not one of them mentioned the book launch. Not once. It was as if the event had never occurred, as if their absence required no explanation or acknowledgement. Complete avoidance, as though ignoring something could make it retroactively disappear. By the fourth day, Janice had reached her breaking point. She stopped attempting to play gracious host, coming home from work and retreating directly to our bedroom for the remainder of each evening. I discovered Daniel wearing my hoodie and using my personal laptop to stream basketball games in my office. When I told him to leave my workspace, he didn't move. He simply looked at me with calculated indifference and said, "Still mad about that whole book thing?" That night, I established the timeline clearly. They had until the end of day 5, then I wanted them gone permanently. No exceptions, no extensions. Daniel shrugged and said he had plans anyway. Linda delivered a lecture to Janice about family bonds being lifelong commitments. My mother sat in silence, as if none of this chaos concerned her personally. On day 5, they didn't begin packing until after dinner. Linda asked if we could loan them just $1,000 to help establish themselves at their next location. Daniel presented this request like it was obviously reasonable. "It's just 1,000. You make plenty." I told them no. I didn't raise my voice or provide detailed explanations. I simply said no. They left in complete silence. No goodbyes, no expressions of gratitude for 5 days of free accommodation, just the sound of that squeaky suitcase being dragged down the street and whatever dignity they could still carry. As soon as the door closed behind them, Janice sat heavily on the stairs and said, "Next time, we don't let them in at all." I didn't tell her there wouldn't be a next time, but I didn't believe it either. I just stood there staring at the empty guest room, thinking about how they never once asked how the book launch had actually gone. The house felt genuinely clean for the first time in days, not just physically tidy, but energetically clear. The air no longer felt invaded. Janice started sleeping through the night again. I began cooking real meals instead of grabbing frozen convenience foods. The silence in our home felt earned rather than empty. Then Aunt Marie called. She lived separately from the core family drama, maintaining a quiet life in a New Jersey condo with her cats and minimal social complications. When I saw her name on my phone, my first assumption was that someone had died. Her voice was tight and strained. "Norman, they're here." I didn't need clarification about who they were. "They showed up with their bags," she continued. "I didn't know what to do. Daniel said you told them they could stay here, that you were handling arrangements, and they just needed a few days off the grid." I nearly laughed at the absurdity. "He said what?" "He said you were managing everything and they just needed temporary space while things got sorted out." She sighed deeply. "They've already consumed half my groceries and somehow Daniel reprogrammed my television to display everything in Spanish." I asked if she needed assistance removing them. She said she'd figure it out. She always did. I thought that would be the end of their latest scheme. 2 nights later, at 11:45 p.m., my phone buzzed with a group text. Daniel had initiated it, including Linda and my mother. "Hey, we're going to be out of Marie's. She's being weird about everything. We'll figure it out, but we need $1,000 just to keep moving. We'll pay you back." Linda followed up. "We're not asking for a handout, just a loan. Think of it as temporary assistance." The cherry on top was my mother's contribution. She reacted to both messages with heart emojis. No words, no explanation, just digital silence disguised as affection. I didn't reply. 5 minutes later, a Venmo request appeared on my phone, $1,000 from Daniel, with the description, "Family help, temporary." I stared at that request until my screen dimmed automatically. The next morning, Janice was already awake when I came downstairs. She looked out our front window and said quietly, "You should see this." Tucked under my windshield wiper was a folded takeout menu from a diner 10 blocks away. On the back, scrawled in thick blue marker, "We're still your family. Stop acting like a stranger. This isn't how we were raised." No signature, no name, just that accusation delivered like a threat. I checked our security camera footage and found the answer. Around 2:14 a.m., a hooded figure had walked up our driveway. The face wasn't visible, but the movement pattern was distinctly Daniel's. That particular combination of arrogance and entitlement that carried through even his body language. This wasn't just a message. It was a warning that they weren't simply broke, they were becoming unstable, unpredictable. Marie texted later that day to report they'd left her place without notice, taking half a pack of steaks from her freezer. One of her cats hadn't returned inside since their departure, though she couldn't prove the correlation. Then Victor, the landlord I'd stopped paying, called unexpectedly. He'd received a call from Daniel asking if I'd resumed the rent payment arrangement, claiming they were trying to move back into their old apartment. Victor wanted to confirm before providing any information. "I haven't spoken to them in days," I told him honestly. "If they're contacting you, that's their problem to solve." "Got it," he said, and hung up immediately. That night, Janice locked every door twice. I didn't mention it to her, but I moved a baseball bat next to our bed. I had a growing suspicion they weren't finished with subtle harassment. The pattern became clear over the following days: the text message, the Venmo requests, the takeout menu under the windshield wiper. These weren't random acts of desperation, they were calculated tests, probing for weaknesses in my resolve. Saturday morning in early May brought a security camera alert at 6:17 a.m. The footage showed Daniel standing motionless on our front porch, hood pulled up, hands buried deep in his jacket pockets. He paced slightly, as if debating whether to knock but never quite committing to the action. After 23 minutes, he left without ever looking directly at the camera. Janice saw the frozen frame on my computer screen and said immediately, "We need to get out of the house today. Breathe some real air." She was right. Our home had started feeling like a fortified bunker rather than a place of comfort. We left around 11 a.m., spent hours at the local farmer's market buying overpriced artisan bread we didn't need, and even discussed taking a trip somewhere completely unrelated to this drama. For 4 hours, we felt normal again. When we returned home, I noticed our back gate was slightly ajar, not wide open, just not fully closed. I always secured that gate. Always. Inside, everything appeared normal at first glance. The living room was untouched, the kitchen undisturbed. But in the hallway cabinet, the top drawer was partially open. That drawer hadn't been accessed in months, containing only old tax documents and paperwork we rarely needed. Investigation revealed that someone had rifled through the contents. Several envelopes had been torn open. A folder labeled "Mortgage Information" was completely missing. We moved quickly through the house, conducting a thorough inventory. Janice discovered that one of her coats was missing from the hall closet. My old winter parka, the one I'd replaced with a better jacket, was also gone. They'd been inside our home. Not to steal valuable items or cause obvious damage, but to send a message. Nowhere was truly secure from their reach. While Janice called the police, I walked around the exterior of our house, checking for signs of forced entry. That's when I remembered the spare key we used to keep under the decorative birdhouse, a precaution from our early years in the house, hidden in a small plastic film canister. I lifted the birdhouse. The canister was gone. When the police arrived, I already knew what they'd tell me. No sign of forced entry. Probably someone with authorized access. Do you have proof of who was inside? No cameras in the house, I admitted. Well, there's not much we can do unless they return. And they probably will. That night felt different. Janice didn't just look exhausted, she looked defeated. Around 10 p.m., she said quietly. I'm the one who let them in that first night. I thought I was being decent, compassionate. You warned me about them, and I insisted on giving them a chance. Now we're installing locks on doors inside our own house. She wasn't seeking forgiveness, she was acknowledging the weight of consequences. I opened my laptop and composed the kind of message you only send once in a lifetime. It went to every family member who had ever requested a favor, a ride, or financial assistance. I spelled out everything clearly. I'd paid Daniel and Linda's rent for 3 years. I'd flown them to New York for my book launch. They'd ignored the event entirely and called my achievement a hobby. They'd broken into my home and stolen personal property. From this point forward, they were strangers to me. Most recipients didn't reply. A few read the message and remained silent. One cousin, Blake, sent a single thumbs-up emoji. 2 days later, I had every lock in our house changed. Janice contacted a lawyer recommended by her supervisor, and we began preparing a formal no-contact notice. It was largely symbolic, but it gave us actionable steps toward reclaiming our sense of security. Weeks passed without incident. No texts, no late-night visits, no mysterious notes. Then an envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was a handwritten note, folded 3 times, containing 6 words. You made this a war. Fine. No signature, but the handwriting was unmistakably Daniel's. I stared at those 6 words for a long time, understanding that everything previous had been preliminary skirmishing. This was a formal declaration of intent. Janice initially didn't want to see the note, suggesting it might be old correspondence. When I showed it to her anyway, she read it once, said nothing, and walked it directly to the paper shredder. I kept my copy in the desk drawer. Not from fear, but as a reminder of how far this situation had deteriorated. The following week brought deceptive calm, no contact attempts, no suspicious activity around our house. It felt like both sides were waiting for the other to make the next move. Then my workplace HR department called. Someone had filed an anonymous complaint alleging that I was using company time to promote my personal writing business, that I'd been caught using company resources for personal profit. The complaint was remarkably detailed and specific: dates I'd been out of office, URLs for writing groups I belonged to, screenshots from my author website. It was complete fabrication. I'd never written during work hours or accessed my author email on company equipment. But the damage was immediate. I had to endure a compliance interview, my manager had to document the incident, and even though everyone knew the allegations were baseless, the stain remained. When I asked about tracing the complaint's source, they informed me it had been submitted through an encrypted online form with no identifying information. I didn't need a name. I knew exactly who had sent it. Janice urged me to let it go, but I couldn't accept that they were now targeting my livelihood. The thing they'd mocked as a hobby was suddenly significant enough to attack professionally. I contacted our lawyer again, asking about legal options. He said if I could definitively link them to the complaint, we might have grounds for action. Otherwise, proving malicious intent would be nearly impossible. I didn't sleep well that week. 2 days later, Janice received a call from an unknown number. The voicemail was from my mother, her first communication since the book launch disaster. She didn't identify her location, just said she'd been praying for reconciliation. She spoke about misunderstandings, and claimed I'd acted out of anger rather than principle. She said Daniel and Linda were struggling financially and I needed to remember that. We're blood. Janice played the message for me once, then deleted it permanently. That same night, our trash bin was overturned in the driveway. Nothing stolen, just dumped out and scattered. I reviewed the porch camera footage and found the same hooded figure, same posture, but this time they looked directly into the camera for several seconds before disappearing into the darkness. I replayed that footage multiple times, studying the way Daniel stared unblinking into the lens. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was announcing his continued presence, his ongoing surveillance, his conviction that I still owed him something. That note, "You made this a war. Fine," wasn't metaphorical. It was a literal declaration of hostile intent. The next morning, Janice stated the obvious. "They're not going to stop. You need to make them stop." So I did. First, I upgraded our home security system to include private cloud storage with real-time backup and additional cameras covering the backyard and garage areas. Then I contacted an old college friend who worked in private security, explaining the entire situation in detail, every wire transfer, every favor, every boundary they'd crossed while I remained silent. "This isn't family dysfunction," he told me. "This is a case file." He referred me to a licensed private investigator. Within 48 hours, I had a comprehensive report that revealed more than I'd expected. Daniel and Linda had been squatting in a condemned duplex near Newark, literally plywood over the windows, no electricity, getting water from a neighbor's outdoor spigot. They'd forced entry through a side door and were sleeping on mattresses salvaged from the curb. Daniel was using a burner phone registered under a false identity. He'd been contacting people from our shared past, old coworkers, former classmates, distant relatives, spinning a narrative about how I'd gotten rich from my book's success and abandoned my struggling family out of selfishness and ego. The irony was staggering. My novel hadn't even sold 4,000 copies. The investigator also confirmed that my mother had quietly relocated to Allentown, staying with a cousin I barely knew. Significantly, she hadn't informed Daniel or Linda of her new address. That choice revealed more about her actual assessment of the situation than any voicemail about family reconciliation. I printed the entire report and attached copies to 2 formal cease and desist letters, one for Daniel, one for Linda. Legal language, cold and precise, documenting their harassment, the text, the surveillance footage, the threatening note, the fraudulent workplace complaint. I included a screenshot of Daniel staring into our security camera with the timestamp clearly highlighted. Janice co-signed both letters. We sent them certified mail with return receipt required. But I wasn't finished. I forwarded a copy of the PI's findings to Victor, their former landlord who had absorbed the financial cost of their eviction. I didn't suggest any specific action, just sent the photos, their current address, and a brief note. "Thought you'd want to know who's living at 2819 Hillcrest." Victor called that evening. He simply said, "Appreciate it," and hung up. I understood what that meant, and I knew it wouldn't repair past damages, but at least the information was available to someone with legitimate grievances. That same week, Janice and I disappeared for 6 days to a cabin upstate. No cell service, no internet, no security cameras. Just books, hiking trails, and a fireplace that required patience to light properly. We didn't discuss Daniel, Linda, or any of the drama even once. When we returned, I checked the security footage expecting to find evidence of attempted intrusion or harassment. Instead, there was nothing, no alerts, no suspicious movement, just wind stirring the trees and the occasional delivery person dropping packages on our porch. I waited for retaliation, some response to the cease and desist letters. But there was only silence until one final package arrived with no return address. Inside was my old hoodie, the one Daniel had stolen during their stay with us, folded neatly and sealed in a plastic bag. No note, just a small piece of paper with one word. "Fine." That was 2 months ago. I haven't heard from any of them since. But I still check the security cameras every morning, not because I'm afraid, but because I understand how stories like this typically end. And I suspect mine isn't completely finished yet.